It is 9:02 a.m. I would like to call to order the meeting of the Transportation Committee of December 14th, 2023. Before we begin, please note this meeting is recorded. Welcome to my colleagues and everyone joining us here in person, as well as those listening on the phone. If you would like to provide public comment in today's meeting, and if you have not done so already, please let Thomas in the back of the room or Justine on the call-in line know what items you would like to speak on today. Madam Secretary, please begin calling the roll.
We're going to start with Director Hernandez. She's absent. She's on her way, I heard. Thank you, Director Thier, for letting me know. Director Moulton-Peters. Here. Director Rabbit. Here. Director Rodoni.
Here.
Director Snyder is absent. Director Thier. Here. Vice Chair Madsen is absent. Chair Hill.
Here.
Present. And President Theriault.
I have arrived.
Thank you. You have arrived. You have a quorum, but you are not a committee of the whole. I'll let you know once you do that. You're really close.
Okay, so let me know. Okay, thank you. Please follow along by referring to the page numbers located on the bottom right-hand corner of the meeting packet. Madam Secretary, please introduce the first item.
Thank you. The first item is before you. It's the packet of Passenger Advisory Committee information. So that's before you, and staff is available if you have any questions. There were 2 meetings since the last time we met in October. So if there's any questions, staff is here to answer any questions.
Yes, Michael.
I would ask the board to note, or the committee to note the letter, the draft letter from the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee on signage on the bridge with ample photographic illustration. So please have a look at that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the directors regarding item number 3? Oh, Holly, you have a question?
Just a comment. Is it comment time? Yes? Okay, great. I just wanted to mention that I attended the San Rafael Transit Center relocation update, and it was fantastic. So I wanted to commend staff for making that happen.
Thank you. Let's see. Should we begin the discussion?
We're on number 3. So if there's no questions on number 3, we move on to
okay.
on 4.
Okay. Oh, we're on 4. Okay. Thanks. Thank you. No action is required for item number 3. We will move on to agenda item 4, which is a presentation relative to the San Rafael Transportation Center Replacement Project update. A copy of the PowerPoint presentation begins on page 41 and has Director of Planning, Ron Downing, is here to kick off the presentation. Ron, go ahead and begin.
Good morning, Chair Hill, members of the committee. This is a very important item moving before you today, and just to provide a little context, the last time that we actually brought anything relative to this project to you was about a year ago. In December of 2022, the board certified and adopted the California Environmental Quality Act analysis that identified the alternative for a new transit center that you'll be hearing more about today, and moved that project forward. Since then, we have been engaged in what we are calling the Community Design Advisory Group process, or CDAG, which was composed of members of the San Rafael community who provided input to our consultant team as far as what they would like to see for the look and feel of the new transit center. It's been a very exciting process. We have been engaging quite extensively with the Canal Alliance. We had a Facebook Live event that I participated in about 2 weeks ago, entirely in Spanish for the benefit of the community. And the enthusiasm among the Canal Alliance representatives and the community was just so encouraging. Much excitement about a new transit facility that's going to be better than what's out there today in terms of better lighting, more amenities, clear sight views, and just a better place to be able to be in between transferring buses and such. So again, a lot of excitement there. We also had a community workshop within the past 2 weeks for the greater San Rafael community. Again, we had people from Voices of the Canal show up, and we had translation services available for them. I asked them if they had any questions. They had no questions whatsoever, and they left smiling. So this was a really heartening event. The momentum is building within the community for the excitement for this new transit center. As I said, we're just looking for design elements for what the look and feel of the new center will be. We have a lot more work to do ahead of us now. A lot of people want to rush to the finish line in terms of what specific bus routes will be leaving from which positions within the new transit center. People want to engineer the passenger pickup and drop-off facility and all kinds of things that we're just not there yet. We have a lot more work to do. The next phase of the consultant work is going to be developing some preliminary engineering drawings. And again, I stress preliminary, subject to revision and refinement. And then ultimately, our engineering staff will issue another contract for final design for the new project. We're still working on the financing package. We know that we will have to apply for federal funding to complete the financing. One of the things that came before us during the summer is we would have to go to the Federal Transit Administration for a clearance under the National Environmental Policy Act. We can take the large percent of our CEQA documentation and use it toward that, but there were some changes last summer that are going to require us to do some much deeper dive. And so that's what we're going to be focused on in the coming months. Again, we're not quite there yet. The excitement is, when are we going to start buying property? When are we going to start building the facility? And again, today we're just giving you a snapshot of where we are, building on the tremendous work that our consultant team has done engaging the community. So I want to acknowledge Ray Santiago is here from the planning staff. He manages the day-to-day activities of the project. And with me today are Adam Dankberg from Kimley Horn, who is our project manager from that team, and Mara from Dialogue, who has done a phenomenal job with the design elements of this project. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to both of them, and they'll take you through the PowerPoint.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, members of the committee. Very happy to be here. It's been several years since I've been here in person, so thanks for having me back. Today, just want to provide an update. Ron gave a great overview. We'll dive a little deeper into the current status of the transit center design, talk about some of the public engagement that we've been up to over the last few months. So in terms of the last time we were in front of the board, it was almost exactly a year ago for the adoption of the final EIR. Since then, we've had a very busy year meeting with the Community Design Advisory Group, several points over the course of the year, a couple rounds of public meetings and Facebook Live events, as well as advancing some of these initial concepts that we'll be sharing with you here today. We've also been coordinating with the Federal Transit Administration on the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act clearance that Ron mentioned, and began some preliminary discussions with the City of San Rafael and Marin Transit about some of the particulars regarding the design. As Ron mentioned, we haven't really kicked off the detailed design in earnest, but we have made some progress and are looking forward to doing so with the conclusion of the public meeting earlier this month. So in terms of overall schedule, we spent several years picking the site. We had a lot of engagement, activity, a lot of time spent on the environmental analysis, gathering public input. So that was a really big milestone last year when we selected the alternative to advance and adopted the final environmental report. So since then, we have been launching this preliminary design effort, but really that first phase of the preliminary design was the public engagement effort, which we've been focused on this year. Still to come, of course, is final design, property acquisition, construction. So many steps still to go. So now I'll hand it over to Maura.
Thank you. So we began last winter assembling a plan for ongoing community engagement that we've now pushed forward over these last about 7 months. So meeting as Adam and Ron talked about, in 2 different categories. The first being the Community Design Advisory Group, which incorporated a small focused group that met repeatedly 4 times over the last 6 months then 2 sets of public meetings, a public open house that was bilingual, and then a Facebook Live event in Spanish. The Community Design Advisory Group was intended to bring together a broad set of diverse voices in which, people from different backgrounds and different interests related to the project could bounce ideas off on another, hear other perspectives, and ultimately with the intent of moving the project forward together to reduce the potential for opposing voices. Ron mentioned the extensive engagement with the Canal Alliance. We did include several members of the CDAG from the Canal, a little bit quiet in the very beginning, not necessarily used to engaging in public process, but through the course of the meetings, they really came out of their shells and started to contribute directly the perspectives of the writers. So the CDAG brought together the Canal Alliance, a number of other community organizations, members of San Rafael Heritage, the Marin County Bicycle Coalition, other groups and individuals with unique perspectives that could come together and share ideas. And so we had 4 meetings. I'll talk through the focus of each of them, but they built on each other based on the feedback received from the community, generated new ideas, and then that was an iterative process in which they provided ongoing feedback to us as we generated new ideas. The first of the meetings for the CDAG was what we call a walk shop. So it's a walking workshop where we distributed little packets that they could write, the CDAG members wrote notes on. We toured the site together, had ideas about the existing transit center, what they wanted to keep, what they wanted to not keep, ideas for improvement and for amenities. We took all those little packets back and tracked all of the ideas and incorporated those into the future design moves. The second CDAG meeting really looked at the big ideas, the big moves, how we would want to advance the project. Things like, where do we put the new customer service building on the block? Where do we put the new transit plaza? What would the look and feel for this place be? What kind of approach would we take for the historic elements or for the bus canopies? So we got really high-level ideas about how to move forward with each of those and put those together into design options. So the third CDAG meeting, we incorporated a number of different ideas from the second meeting and put out a series of different options for specifically how to integrate the historic elements of the Northwestern Pacific Depot building and a few other design concepts for placemaking. During that third CDAG meeting, the members of the CDAG really coalesced around what we called the courtyard option. That incorporated an interior courtyard between parts of the customer service building. There were a number of different reasons why the courtyard option was considered to be favorable. Partly the way it highlighted some of the historic elements from the 1929 depot building, partly because of placemaking opportunities for additional seating adjacent to the public waiting room. And a number of other opportunities that were highlighted at that time. So the courtyard option was continued to be developed and shared back an additional approach and kind of series of very, very early design concepts at that fourth CDAG meeting. And at that fourth CDAG meeting, we did share some very early renderings. We then took some of the ideas from that meeting and integrated them in particular to the way people moved around the plaza, to the way the bike lane might potentially be configured. A number of different ideas came out of that. Then we incorporated into the overall approach that we shared back at the series of public meetings that followed. So we also mentioned that there were 2 public open houses. One was back in August when we solicited really early ideas. What are the types of amenities that people would want at the transit center? What's the look and feel? What kind of, what kind of plantings and materials would be desirable for the community? So the ideas that we received back in August were very similar to what we heard from the CDAG. A lot of alignment between the various groups. We then came back to a second public open house
just last week. We heard reference to that earlier, and again received really a tremendous amount of overarching support, a lot of different types of comments, and then in parallel, 2 Facebook Live events that were hosted by the Canal Alliance in Spanish, in which we conveyed very similar types of information as at the open house, at both open houses, and heard feedback from that group. And again, very strong alignment with the types of interests and preferences that were communicated during the CDAG meetings. So coming out of that process, we're, as Adam said, about to jump off into a more focused preliminary design activity. To orient you a little bit to the site, this plan that you're looking at either on paper or on the screen, north is to the right. So Highway 101 is at the very bottom, with 3rd Street on the left and 4th Street on the right. The SMART tracks go straight through the middle of the drawing. Although we do absolutely look at this as one entire transit center with a SMART station in the center of it, in terms of the way that we're looking at some of the design elements, we do see on one side the customer service building and plaza with bus bays on Tamalpais Avenue. And then on the other side of the SMART tracks, east of SMART, is a bus canopy that would serve a number of bus bays between Heatherton and the SMART station. And so there's, pickup drop-off, 2-way bike lane, a number of different amenities, things that we heard from the community, in particular, street trees wherever physically possible, really try to green the space up and make it a richer and more enjoyable environment, both for bus riders as well as for the many, many people who pass through these intersections on a daily basis. The historic elements of the Northwestern Pacific Depot are incredibly important to the project. So they're, through the course of the CDAG and the open houses and Facebook Live events, one of the things that we heard was there's a very strong interest in retaining those elements that are historically significant from the railroad era, and that the railroad era is a very important part of the history of San Rafael. And although the building has been changed tremendously over time, anything that reflects the original 1929 condition or early railroad condition is really something special that we'd like to keep. Now, unfortunately, most of that 1929 building no longer exists as it was built, or exists at all. It's been removed from the site. But those elements that do still exist, in particular, several of the exterior facades facing both east and west, we're proposing to effectively take apart and relocate to the new customer service building, where they would be rebuilt as a part of the new project. And so those pieces that are able to be moved would be moved, and then the remainder of the customer service building would really reflect the memory of the other elements of that 1929 building that no longer exist, that we aren't able to move because they were taken down decades ago. Moving on then, just to give you a quick highlight of some of the early design ideas that came out directly from the public engagement. The plaza was a considerable interest to many of the participants. Really a strong interest in large trees and named tree species. London plane trees got a lot of interest from the members of the CDAG in particular. The types of materials used, the style of benches, the types of plantings, really pushed us in the direction that you see here. And this is, kind of a look and feel approach to the rendering. I talked a little bit about the historic elements of the building. The second rendering shows how those would be incorporated adjacent to the plaza, really trying to bring back the public face of what once was a public-facing building, now would become a public-facing building once again. And then finally, with the bus canopy that's on the east side of the SMART tracks, this reflects an interest on the part of both the bus riders and the other community members who were a part of the CDAG to really introduce a substantially sized bus shelter that would welcome visitors and residents alike to San Rafael. And then also, by doing so, provide a certain amount of coverage for bus riders. We heard a lot about the need for increased coverage from rain, from wind, from sun. And so there was, the scale of the bus shelter that you see here really reflects the joint interests on a part of the bus riders to have increased protection, as well as other community members to really have a strong welcoming statement for people entering the community.
Couple final slides in terms of where we're going from here. There's several key coordination topics to be resolved that we're actively working with key agency partners on. That includes working with the City of San Rafael on several topics such as the Greenway configuration, which is the bike and pedestrian trail through here, the Tamalpais Avenue configuration and ownership, and the overall city design review process. Some other key coordination items include the street crossings. We'll be modifying the smart crossings to move around some gate arms and crosswalks and things like that. So we're working with CPUC. We're in transit on the bus bays and making sure they're comfortable with that configuration, as well as the FTA in particular on the cultural resources analysis. So some key next steps is next month, we'll be starting some similar presentations to a couple of boards. I believe we're going to the SMART board as well in the first couple months of 2024. So we'll have some very similar presentations to those other affiliated agencies. We'll be advancing the preliminary engineering, continuing work with the FTA on NEPA clearance. And then as Ron mentioned earlier, right-of-way procurement, the acquisition of the property can't occur until after the NEPA clearance is received. So that's still a little ways out. And then as Ron mentioned, the district will then be procuring the final design contract, hopefully sometime in 2024. So with that, thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ron, Adam, and Nora for the presentation. I used the center, and it looks really impressive what's happening in the future there. So thank you. Dennis, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just very briefly, I'd like to thank our partners, the City of San Rafael, Marine Transit, SMART, and the Transportation Authority Marin. I especially want to give a shout out to the city. This is their gateway. This is, their house, their real estate, and they've been a fabulous partner. We navigated some initially bumpy waters, and kudos to them for working with us. So I can't thank the city enough. This project would not be moving forward without the support. I would like to also thank the members of CDAG. CDAG is something that we proposed to the City Council. A typical project in the community goes through your typical design review board process in your city. And typically, those groups are made up of retired architects, and that oftentimes doesn't reflect the users of the facility. It doesn't oftentimes reflect the diversity of the community. So it's important to us that we come up with something different. And so we proposed to the city having this CDAG, which is 1/3 users, 1/3 neighbors, and 1/3 people passing through. So you kind of capture everybody. And kudos to the city for embracing it. We worked with the city on the appointment of the very, interested, talented individuals. And I just want to thank all the people that participated in that CDAG process for their input, because this is a very important project to the Bridge District, the SMART Marine Transit, but also the broader community in San Rafael, because, it is a gateway to the city. So I just want to echo those thanks, and I'll turn it back to you, Chair Hill.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from directors? Well, a whole slew. Who was first? Did you see? Okay. Director Garbarino.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to echo what Dennis just said. I think it was about a year ago. I know that because my dogs were new to me, and we were there 3.5 hours, and I thought they were going to be eating the house. And we attended that meeting at City Hall, as you mentioned. It was quite the live wire topic, and the phenomenal way that you all brought in the community. And subsequent to that, I was lucky enough to have a meeting with Omar Carrera from the Canal Alliance. And the peacefulness with which you brought everyone to this place is greatly appreciated. So thank you very much, all of you.
President Terry?
I want to compliment you on convening this design advisory group. That was a great idea. But there's a little counterpoint here. We have a letter from San Rafael Heritage, if you have seen that, I'd appreciate some comment on their letter.
I can offer a little comment. Anytime you have a project that is a gateway to community, you have lots of people with opinions. And opinions are not always unanimous. and that's, something that we're still navigating. With respect to building, the Whistle Stop building is a beloved building, but whether it's protected under historic preservation law is a legal question. And under the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, and under California Historic Preservation Law, and we have, I should step back, we have some experience with historic properties here. So, so the bridge is a historic property. Our toll plaza is not. This building is not, because they've been substantially modified. Our toll booths look different than they did, but it's a beloved structure. It's a beloved clock. So there's a difference between beloved and being legally protected under historic preservation laws. So we were able to remove several toll booths to put in the movable median barrier, because while it's beloved, it's not historic. And as long as we keep the clock, I believe I got to keep my job. So I think that comes into play here. So it's a beloved structure. The design team has listened to the community, and where we are today with the very conceptual design tries to capture the parts of the building that are representative of the initial structure. And what you see there today is not the original structure, just like this building isn't the original building, or the toll plaza is not the original toll plaza.
Thank you.
There do seem to be a number of elements in the letter that might be accommodated if we so decided. Color of glass.
I'll defer to Mara on that specific.
You're absolutely right. And we've been receiving feedback. As I mentioned, a member of the San Rafael Heritage, the author of that letter, did sit on the CDAG and provided ongoing feedback throughout the process. That is, one voice of many in that group, but really, really helpful. We've done our own analysis, including structural evaluation of the building, to try to understand what really does still exist, what no longer exists, what's physically able to be moved, and what can't be. Some of the letters that the group has received include requests that aren't physically possible, and so we need to be able to weigh technical factors like that, along with the interest in the community. Many of the ideas that have been brought forward in the letter that you're referring to, as well as other information we've received on this topic, are absolutely things that we're able to consider and incorporate. And many of them are things that are already in mind for the customer service building. There are a few things that do present a certain level of challenge. Some community members have expressed interest, for example, in physically rebuilding original conditions that no longer exist on the site. That's not considered to be good practice professionally, architecturally, to recreate something, rebuild something from scratch using modern materials and methods that was a historic element from a different era. So there are other approaches that we can take in order to reflect and represent that history without actually trying to kind of Disneyfy it and recreate, because it would not be the same. That's not possible. But we do believe that there is a very solid path forward with respect to the types of issues that have come through.
Thank you. That's exactly the genre of response I was looking for.
Thank you, Mara. Director Peter?
Yes, thank you so much. This is a very, very exciting project. I first want to thank Dennis and his team. I know when I first got on this board, relations might have been a little prickly. I'll put it prickly, right? But you've managed to turn that around and get the entire community, as well as the elected community in San Rafael, to work with you to deliver what I think will be a fantastic project, a fantastic gateway to the city. There was one concern that was brought up in one of the letters. There was a concern about not having a restroom that could accommodate disabled individuals in the transit center's eastern portion. So I did want to just say that I'm hopeful that that is not the case, and that if it is, it would be great to make those modifications so that people with differing abilities would not have to walk across many streets to use a restroom. So I'll let you comment on that now. I don't know if that's Dennis or if you guys want to comment, and then I just had a final comment.
On that one.
I can take that. Yeah, right now, the customer service building that is on the west side of the Smart Tracks is where all of the interior amenities are located, including the restrooms. There is an accessible restroom as a part of that customer service building, but today there is not an intent for any indoor amenities planned as a part of the bus bays that are on the east side of the tracks. And so any of those amenities would be accessed separately.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, there's one restroom in the whole area, which is in the customer service building.
There are two restrooms. One of those is currently planned from a physical space constraint perspective to be accessible. We could make both of them accessible if that were deemed to be necessary. Standard practice today is one.
I would love to see them both accessible, assuming that doesn't.
We can certainly take a look at that.
Change the entire design of the project, but yes, I think that would be a good accommodation for people with differing abilities. I also want to echo my president's remarks regarding San Rafael heritage and other historic issues. You know, if there's a way to honor this, I think that's also a very good thing. But I did want to say, as I said before, I was at the meeting. It was the same night as my town council meeting, so I didn't get to stay very long, but I did get to see the public engaging and also our board staff. And it was great. So thank you for your work, and thank you, Dennis, and your team.
Thank you, Director. Yes. Director Stephanie Moulton, who's
Yeah, I just wanted to add my thanks and agree with Director Garbarino and Thea that it really was a very thorough process. And I find that while it can often seem slow and ponderous, that this is the way you build community support and really get a great product. And I think you've done that. So thank you. Thank you for the extra work.
Thank you, Director. Director Luzzoni.
Yeah, thank you. I too want to compliment staff on the outreach that they've done. I've attended several meetings and it's really been enjoyable to see the community engaging. But I did just want to remind everyone, this is a really, really long project. And it's really important we continue that engagement and keep people informed as we go. As I often find projects go off into the planning and construction stage and forget about the public at that point. And it's important in this area and this project that it continue that engagement.
Thank you. Fernandez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My comment is similar, and I want to throw some additional thank yous to the team for making sure that the community and stakeholders are all involved in this process and have an opportunity for input. My question though is, is the work of the CDAG concluded at this point? Is it considered concluded in a closed process with the CDAG? And secondly, with regard to the follow-up, is there a formal mechanism for the community, and in particular the Canal Alliance, to have input as the project moves forward, as my fellow director said, all the way through construction and presentations with the ribbon cutting, whatever is going to happen. Thank you.
So the answer is yes. The CDAG process is concluded, but the public engagement process is not. And clearly, we're designing a facility that, in addition to being a gateway to the town, has to work for the users of the facility. So we will continue the engagement with the users of the facility and Canal Alliance.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any other questions or comments from directors? Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Abbott.
And Joe Picalda, since we're talking about kind of the historical design standards, I think it's pardon the pun, but it's the age-old architectural dilemma of how best to honor the past but not replicate it. And because if you try to replicate it in many jurisdictions around, you see examples of it, it fails miserably and it's actually not appropriate. So I think what the proposal moving forward is a nice one, subtle, but obviously giving a nod to what was there previously and understanding the difference between what's legally protected and what's not. So thank you for that, and I think we should continue down that vein. There are always going to be, and they are great advocates, but I think that tension is always there, and we just need to make sure that we always err on the side of good design, because that will be even more timeless going forward.
Thank you, Director.
I'm quite familiar with these debates.
Thank you, Director. Do we have any other comments, questions by the Director? Seeing none, thank you. No action is required on this informational. Okay. Thank you. Okay. No action is required on this informational presentation, but before we move to the next item, Madam Secretary, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on item number 4?
Yes, we have probably speakers on the line, but we're going to accommodate the speakers in the building first. So I have Jeff Rhodes wanting to speak on this item. Jeff Rhodes, can you have a seat at the end there, please?
Good morning, all. Thank you all for considering this matter. My name is Jeff Rhodes. I'm a resident of San Rafael and a member of the CDAG. My background is in city building, urban design, architecture, and historic preservation. And my motivation for involvement and continued support of the Downtown Transit Center is the belief that the Transit Center will achieve a robust sense of place, creating a fine gateway for downtown San Rafael. This project will act as a catalyst for improvement of downtown. It will promote investment, including new housing and restoration of our historic resources. It will promote transit use. The district's community stakeholder participation efforts in the design process, including the CDAG, have been beneficial. The district and its consultant team have listened, resulting in a conceptual design that has great promise. Clearly, they have been motivated by transit user comfort and needs. Detailed work to finalize the design and resolve technical issues with stakeholders and the cities is yet to be done. We aren't quite there yet. Let's move forward from good to great. Our recommendations include restoring the 1929 Northwestern Pacific Depot. This is a physical symbol of place as the transit hub of San Rafael since 1884. It will be a superb example of Spanish colonial revival architecture of the interurban railway era, similar to the Mill Valley Station. We need an additional 6 feet of width in order to accommodate the original building footprint. Creation of a depot square on the 4th Street side with cafes on 2 edges, including the depot building to the south and an existing 1880s stick-style Victorian commercial building to the west. The depot square will be of sufficient size and orientation to serve as a programmable public space and the pedestrian bike gateway between downtown and the transit center. A single compelling roof form covering all bus bays between the SMART track and Heatherton. This protects transit users from the elements and provides a modern architectural counterpoint to the historic context. The last slide of the presentation you saw is an example of what can be achieved. We recognize there are budgetary and design constraints to overcome. Shared space for bikes and people between the district services building and the bus bays on the west side of Tamalpais Avenue. We really don't want to see a bike highway passing through this public space. We need to find a way to get all users to watch out for one another and respect one another. We also really advocate for the notion of public art in the project as we move forward, as an opportunity to reflect the cultural diversity of San Rafael and enhance the prominence of the place. The initial idea of the courtyard concept presented by the design team appeared to be enticing. After further analysis, we recommend against it for several reasons. It reduces available space for building program, including leasable space. It's likely to cost as much to build as creating an enclosed building space. It's difficult to control and maintain. It requires a cafe tenant to activate 2 outdoor spaces on each side of the tenant space, which adds to the operating expense, diverting focus from the plaza facing 4th Street. And most importantly, it prevents full restoration of the exterior of the 1929 depot building. Another area of considerable interest to us is the access drive on the west side of the district service and depot building, and we believe it requires further refinement. This road will introduce another intersection on 4th Street between Lincoln and the SMART tracks. Existing traffic conditions can be colloquially defined as a shit show, unfortunately.
Wrap up.
I will indeed. Adding this new conflict and concentrating passenger drop-off and pickup will not help the situation. Passenger drop-off and pickup should be distributed to several different points of origin. This requires working with the city and other stakeholders to select other locations. We believe that elimination of that drive and the connection to 4th Street will allow a larger, more usable depot square, and propose a single drive that enters and exits from 3rd Street. Achieving this vision requires a cooperative effort between the district, the city, and other key stakeholders. We are committed to working with all to make this vision a reality and stand to continue to help the district. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public?
We have no other cards for speakers in the room, but I know there are a number of maybe speakers on the line, so I'm going to flip it over to Justine, who's moderating the public line. Justine, are you there?
Good morning. I am here. Thank you. We do have one speaker for this item, but I would like to poll the room once that speaker has finished, if that's okay.
Sure. That's fine.
Okay, our first speaker for this item is Bill Carney. Mr. Carney, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is Bill Carney. I'm chair of Sustainable San Rafael and also a member of the Community Design Advisory Committee. I want to thank your staff and consultants for working with the community on the design of the transit center. Much progress has been made towards an exemplary project at the gateway to downtown San Rafael. We remain concerned that pedestrians and passengers need to be given priority in all aspects of the design, especially those relating to bike access. To that end, we strongly endorse the multi-use option 3 presented at the December 6th public workshop for treatment of bike access at the public plaza fronting the east side of the restored depot building. This option would integrate bikes and pedestrians in a single shared space with signage and textured paving to signal cyclists that the space is predominantly pedestrian, requiring appropriate speed and care to be exercised by all users. The multi-use option corresponds with the multi-use bicycle and pedestrian path included in the 2008 SMART ballot authorization, which is fulfilled by the North-South Greenway multi-use path through San Rafael. This one block in the Greenway with the most pedestrian use should likewise be treated with the greatest respect for those on foot as they access buses, trains, and the depot that serves all passengers. Thanks very much for your consideration and support of this option.
I'm going to need to poll the room. We did have some new callers, if you don't mind. Just give me a moment to do that. Thank you. Is there anyone that's joined us that would like to speak under this item? Please use ** to unmute yourself and give me your name. Again, if you'd like to speak under this item, please press ** to unmute yourself and give me your name. Okay, I'm not hearing anybody. That concludes my speakers for this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to agenda item number 5, which is a presentation on the Larkspur Ferry Service and Parking Expansion Progress Update. The PowerPoint presentation begins on page 61 and Ron will start this presentation and introduce the team working on this effort. Ron, please begin.
Good morning again, Chair Hill, members of the committee. I'm going to take you back in time for a moment to 2019. Our Larkspur ferry service was literally bursting at the seams with riders and demand for parking at the Larkspur terminal. We envisioned this study back in 2018, 2019 as a means of addressing that problem. Unfortunately, as everybody knows, there was a catastrophic event that intervened and caused us to regroup on this study. We were looking at available travel demand models that were calibrated to 2018. So there wasn't anything really available that could look at the future and see what we would be expecting for our Larkspur ferry service. Nonetheless, the Jacobs team has moved forward, spent a great deal of time using available travel data to develop a demand forecast for a return of ferry demand at Larkspur to those 2019 levels. And again, those conditions that were present at that time will come back to us. So part of the study also looked at the current threshold of 42 crossings on the Larkspur service. And we're embarking on an environmental analysis that would clear a higher threshold of that 42 crossings to meet that future demand, and how additional ferry service would affect the shoreline. Some very good things have happened in the past month and a half. You all have adopted high-speed catamaran service as the future of Larkspur ferry service. You'll see as part of this presentation that that's a very good thing relative to the old Spalding vessels, which did have a much greater impact on the shoreline. So moving forward, great step moving forward for the future of Larkspur service. So the team today here consists of a Jacobs team, which David Dick is the project manager of, Apex Strategies, who is responsible for the public outreach and engagement part, Civic Edge working in tandem with Apex Strategies, CHS Consulting Group, which has done the travel demand analysis, and DLR Group is the design sub-consultant who's going to show you some possible concepts of what a parking structure might look like at the Larkspur Ferry Terminal. Again, today's item is just for information. There is no action required. What I wanted to do was bring this information to you so you see it first in anticipation of a public meeting. We will go to the public in early 2024 to talk about what you'll see today. Get some feedback, get some perspective on what people would like to see of the future of Larkspur service. So again, this one is not quite as far along as the previous presentation that you saw in the San Rafael Transit Center. It's been overdue for a check-in. There's been a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and today's a great opportunity for the Jacobs team to show you the work that they've been doing. So David, please take over.
Thanks, Ron. It's great to be here, and we have actually several other members of the team to help address questions later. Ron gave a great introduction to the project. We do have a lot of slides, so I'm going to move a little bit quickly because I know there's a lot of material today. Onto the project overview and background. Ron already gave a good introduction to that on the 2019 conditions, which saw high demand at the Larkspur Ferry Terminal, which led to this study, which, as Ron said, looks to get preliminary alternatives, develop preliminary alternatives, and get environmental clearance for a parking structure at the Larkspur Ferry Terminal, environmental clearance for additional ferry trips across the bay, and preliminary design for that parking structure based on forecast demands and a robust outreach process. The work we've done to date, we have done ferry demand forecasting, again, as Ron mentioned, initial environmental analyses, and developing some of those parking structure alternatives, which we'll share with you shortly. Stakeholder outreach. So stakeholder outreach is, and community support is a very important part of this project. And one of the early stages, we reached out to a number of individuals, community groups, environmental organizations to identify what their key issues and drivers were for this project. So this included elected officials, environmental groups, community organizations, community-based organizations. What we heard from these were congestion along Sir Francis Drake Boulevard is a key concern. Impacts on transit ridership, both the levels of transit ridership in COVID, as well as transit connectivity. The environmental impacts of ferry service and potential parking structure, and impacts to nearby residents. Well, this is a list for reference of those we've engaged with. I'll let folks review that on their own. Excuse me. So getting environmental clearance for additional trips across the bay, as Ron mentioned, that currently sits at 42 trips, and additional service would require additional environmental clearance. Starting that process includes a wake wash analysis of the existing ferry fleet. To do that, and this is it's hard to see, this is a small diagram here. I'm going to use the pointer on the, let's see if this, I don't know, maybe here, that's not showing up. I apologize. Yeah. So the consultant team put out wake gauge measurement devices at 6 locations. One, well, we'll see those in a minute a little bit better. One adjacent to the Larkspur Ferry Terminal and very near the Green Bay Boardwalk community. One location along the Corte Madera Channel, further out along Point San Quentin. One location out in the bay. One location adjacent to Paradise Cay, and 2 locations along the Mudflats and the Corte Madera Ecological Reserve. The results are analyzed across 7 criteria, and these include multiple types of shoreline, from natural shoreline to revetments and man-made structures, multiple types of boats, from rowing shells up to sailboats, natural habitat, and the seabed. So the fast ferries or catamaran vessel types, these are the results of, I went too far. Hit the wrong thing. I was trying to use the pointer. I will not do that again. This shows the results of the wake gauge measurements for, again, apologies, for the fast ferry, the Napa class vessel, which are the catamarans. The numbers there are the measurements for the inbound and outbound trips. And as you can see here, the results showed that there were no impact from the wakes from the catamaran fast ferries across almost all criteria. The sole one that has a yellow there is for passive boating, and that in this case is rowing shells, which, as you know, a very shallow freeboard of a number of inches that are not aligned perpendicular to a ferry wake. And this is just along the Corte Madera Channel near the end of Point San Quentin, and then out in the bay at wave gauge 3, which is on here. You can see it's a bit south of the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. Similarly, for the Spalding class, these are the single hull older vessels. There is almost no impact across all criteria. Both the Spalding and the fast ferries do operate under speed restrictions leaving the ferry terminal. For the fast ferries, that's until the end of Point San Quentin, and for the Spalding class vessels, it's further out into the bay. So in summary, the results have shown that there is, again, virtually no impact from wakes from the existing ferry fleet. In this context, it is helpful to consider some of the differences between the multi-hull catamarans and the Spalding or single-hull vessels. Multi-hull vessels are more stable in operating. They're wider than the Spalding class vessels. They displace less water and generate less wake, and they can move faster. So they're better for customers for travel time. And this positions the district well as, with the recent board action, you move towards fast ferry operations in the future. So ferry demand forecasting. So this is the foundation of the project. Without increased ferry riders, there would be no need for this project. In addition to traveler attributes, we incorporated forecast residential and job growth into the numbers, and we used the TAM model to get results for this process. Of course, the impacts of COVID are a significant challenge for this process. As you know, we have yet to see still where work from home will land, and there are significant impacts to downtown San Francisco work job market. To accommodate this, we took a scenario approach and developed a range of forecasts based on a low work from home scenario, which we used the pre-COVID work from home, 11.4%, and bounded at the low end of ferry ridership would be incorporating the peak COVID work from home, which was about 42% of trips would be work from home. This resulted in a forecast showing a return to baseline or 2019 ridership in around 2032-33. And from there, robust growth with 2040 forecast ridership of 10 to 11,000 round trips per day from the Larkspur Ferry Terminal, which is at that point getting close to double the 2019 baseline figures. Of course, we've got no crystal balls for how this is all going to pan out. So one of the key recommendations is to revisit these forecasts every 2 years and update those numbers based on the actual ferry ridership. You know, there's obviously continued shifting characteristics in transit ridership. Congestion along Highway 101 in the San Rafael corridor is also a key factor, as travel times are they're a key factor in mode choice for travelers. And we're just, you know, obviously we're still figuring out and seeing how downtown San Francisco is going to recover and what's going to happen with that market. Moving on to the preliminary parking structure concepts. So we took a number of criteria into consideration when developing these, including certainly the initial outreach, community and stakeholder outreach. We looked at 2 locations, the main lot at the Larkspur Ferry Terminal and the overflow lot adjacent to the SMART station. This gives you a little bit of context. There are renderings in the next couple of slides. One set of renderings is an aerial view, both from the Greenbrae Boardwalk perspective, as well as from Larkspur Landing, like as if you're above 101, and then a couple of street level views along Sir Francis Drake. The main parking lot, there are several different ways you could do a parking structure here. Here, the main attributes are that we can maintain the feel of the existing parking structure, surface lot, excuse me. Certainly a benefit is that it's directly adjacent to the ferry terminal. However, the one drawback is there'd be significant impacts during construction, as you know, much of the parking at the Larkspur Ferry Terminal will be unavailable while this is being constructed. A couple of other concepts that have been put together: a long and narrow structure down the middle, a full plate coverage essentially of the Larkspur Ferry of the ferry parking lot. And depending on the configuration chosen, this could be up to a 2-story single to perhaps 3. We're also conducting a seismic assessment to determine how large that could be. So these are some of the visual renderings. The top rendering here is aerial. In the immediate foreground, those are the Greenbrae Boardwalk community houses, and you're looking across the water to the parking structure. You can see a two-story structure there. And the lower rendering is from 101 looking towards the Larkspur Ferry Terminal parking lot, and you can see the structure there. From the street level, the top view here is from Larkspur Landing Circle across Sir Francis Drake, looking at the existing parking lot, and you can see the two-story structure there. The bottom rendering is along Sir Francis Drake with the Larkspur Ferry Terminal on your right-hand side, and you can just see a two-story structure on the far right, kind of the lower half. That's the perspective we've got. The other option is at the overflow lot, seen here, upper left side of the aerial shot. Some of the key attributes here, it would have a much lower visual impact, kind of tucked against the hill below 101. And there would be low construction impact. Certainly this could be built and there'd be no impact on the main ferry parking lot. The obvious drawback is the distance from the ferry terminal. This would be a longer walk for ferry customers. The visual renderings here, again, the same perspectives as previous. From the Green Bay Boardwalk, you cannot. You can pick it out if you're eagle-eyed on the left middle, not all the way over. And again, I'm sorry, I can't use this pointer, but it's virtually essentially unseen from the Green Bay Boardwalk perspective. Yep, thanks, Dennis. Appreciate that.
Can you do that again?
It's right there. It's right there, tucked into the hill.
And then the lower perspective, the parking structure is clearly in the foreground. This is just below 101, looking across to the Larkspur Ferry Terminal parking lot across the street, across Sir Francis Drake. Street level views. The top view, the parking structure is prominent. This is looking north. I'm going to be a little off on the directions. Looking up Larkspur Landing Circle as if you were exiting the Larkspur Ferry Terminal parking lot. 101 is on the other side of the parking lot in this view. And then the lower image is going along Sir Francis Drake, again with the Larkspur Ferry Terminal parking lot on your right, and it's you don't see the parking structure from that view. It's off screen to the left there. So just to briefly recap the main lot and overflow lot alternatives. Certainly the main lot has good ferry terminal access, although there is high construction impact. The overflow lot has a longer walk for pedestrians. There is a low construction impact. It is also it's adjacent, closer to the Larkspur Landing, the shopping center there. So there's potential on weekends for multi-use. One other aspect I forgot to mention about the overflow lot, it is more limited in size. So on its own, it likely could not meet the 2040 parking demand. We have been taking certainly into consideration some of the areas of concern identified from stakeholders, visual impacts and traffic. We will be using that as we move into the evaluation of these alternatives going forward. So future phases, work that's coming up for the project. So we are currently developing some landside access scenarios, essentially what these parking structures would mean, how people would enter and exit around Sir Francis Drake. We are going to be taking these preliminary alternatives to the public. We're looking at Q1 of 2024 to do initial public outreach. After that outreach, we'll take the results of that, do a formal evaluation of those criteria to identify a preferred parking structure alternative. From there, we will move into the CEQA process to obtain environmental clearance for the parking structure. At this point, we are anticipating taking a programmatic approach to the environmental process. We've got 20-year forecasts as well as midterm, 5 and 10-year. Taking a phased approach and a programmatic approach to the environmental document will allow construction of a parking structure that would meet the medium-term demand while facilitating the review and construction of a phase 2 structure further down the road that met the full demand. Project completion. The results of this project will include, again, environmental clearance for a selected parking structure alternative, as well as for additional ferry trips across the bay to meet increased ferry demand. Preliminary design for a potential expanded parking facility, as well as preliminary design for a potential parking structure facility. And at that point, the board would be prepared to make a decision as to how you would want to move forward with implementation. Talked about this already, so I'll go relatively quickly through schedule and next steps. This is a high level. We are currently, certainly in the end of 2023, we anticipate having, again, the public outreach meetings in Q1 of 2024. Public outreach is the top section of this schedule. The blue section, phase 1, is preliminary alternative development and selection. We are through much of that at this point in time, and we anticipate, as a result of that outreach process, having a selected alternative in 2024, moving down into the green phase, which is environmental review, as well as preliminary design, and then resulting in a final environmental document and preliminary design complete in approximately 2 years. This is a repeat of what I've been talking about for quite a while now. So I will leave it at that. We do have members of the team here as well for questions. Thank you.
And just to wrap it all together for you all, again, this is just for information today. There are no decisions to be made. The parking design staff has really taken it and run with it and come up with some ideas, but by no means are we there yet. On the other hand, 2032 isn't that far away. So it's good to start thinking about this and considering what the future of the Larkspur service would be. So again, some really good ideas on the table. We haven't kicked off the environmental process. We haven't had our first stakeholder engagement with the community, but David and his team have put some really good thought into bringing the Larkspur service forward into the future. So I think we'd like to take any questions that you have right now.
Can I say a few words first? Yeah, sure. Just to reiterate, we're not going to build a parking garage next year or the year after or the year after or the year after. The purpose of this project is before the pandemic, we were at capacity. We were leaving customers behind, typically Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays for several trips. We have a 450 capacity boat leaving, and we had people showing up and they couldn't get on board. And we're limited by the current environmental approvals to 42 trips a day out of Larkspur. So we were in that situation, and then SMART extended to Larkspur, and then 2 months later, the pandemic hit. And we had just started marketing sail and rail. But we knew that we need to have more than 42 trips a day out of Larkspur. So the genesis of this is that overcrowding and the inability to meet customer demand. Now, we run a monopoly, so people can't take the boat into the city. They can just hop in their car and drive. And, you get their money that way too. But the genesis of this is we were busting at the seams. Subsequent to all that, we had a pandemic. We had to reset the travel models because we know we're not there today. So we are adding a few trips back every couple of months. And we'll be adding probably 2 more trips come January to our Larkspur ferry service. So it's slowly coming back. No one's got a Ouija ball that works. But we know someday we'll need more than 42 trips a day out of Larkspur. Last I checked, all the local elected officials in this room have adopted housing goals and have adopted housing plans. You're going to be building housing. And the Bay Area economy is projected to grow. So the question is how do we want people to get from the North Bay to San Francisco? Do we want to give them the option of taking a boat? The Larkspur Ferry Terminal is located in a very opportune location in terms of capturing a lot of market share. So I just want to provide that context. We don't need all these trips today, but if we sit on our hands and wait till we are leaving people behind again, and then start the environmental process to add trips, we're not going to be able to meet our customer needs. So it's important that we do something. So what we did is we gathered a lot of information to start the conversation with the public. We have some images that'll spark conversations with the public. We know that, and that's healthy. But what we want to talk to the public about is that we were busting at the seams. All of you are going to build a lot of housing in your communities. People are going to be going to ball games, concerts, events, jobs, whatever. And how do we want them, what options do we want to give them to move through the region? And do we want to accommodate them on water? And then whether it meets any of our personal goals and expectations or not, right or wrong, 79% of our customers drove to the Larkspur Ferry Terminal. We had free shuttle buses that were very well used through the Ross Valley. We did free shuttle buses in other neighborhoods as pilots. We'd run them for 9 months and we'd cancel them because people wouldn't take them. So we've tried other strategies. We will be trying those strategies again in the future as we see customers return. Right now, we don't have enough ridership to warrant those free shuttles. But as things come back, we'll do those tools, but we don't want to be caught flat-footed. So we want to start the environmental process next year, start the conversations with the public about expanding the number of trips. And then as part of that, we want to acknowledge that, at least historically, a lot of you drove, you customers. And as a business, it doesn't always work to tell customers how they should interact with you. They're going to make their own choices. And we're fortunate that whatever choice they make, they're our customer. But so I think we want to think about that because I know some people have a natural aversion to see, do we really want to build more parking? But do you really want those folks driving through Southern Marin, driving into San Francisco and further clogging the streets in the city, removing space for automobiles, pedestrians, some people have to ride, but pedestrians and bicyclists? Or do we want to reduce the number of vehicles on the road in our service area? So I just want to throw that little caution out there. We're not seeking anything today. We just want to let you know we're going to start a conversation. We've done the wake analysis. We've come up with some images to get people all excited. And we look forward to kicking things off after the first of the year.
Yes, are there any questions or comments by directors? Okay, President Terrio.
Thank you. I have some detailed questions. The overflow lot is bounded on the north and south by small office buildings. What rights do they have to that parking area now, and will they have in the future?
None. We own it. It would help SMART if we built a parking structure there. A lot of SMART customers want to drive and get on a SMART train. A lot of people get there other ways, but SMART has a dearth of parking. So if we were to build at that location, it would be able to be used by SMART. On weekends when we have less customer demand, we could make it available to nearby merchants. But that would be something we could negotiate in the future. But, I think that location would be of interest to our partners at SMART.
Then a couple places with regard to the possible location closer to the terminal and the main lot. You referred to the study refers to the Bay Conservation Development Commission line. How is that boundary defined?
It's very clearly defined by state law. The McIntyre Petrus Act created the Bay Conservation Development Commission in the 1970s. And it's a line that's actually moved because of court cases. But their jurisdiction is within 100 feet of the high tide line, not the highest ever tide line. So they have a jurisdiction ban that if you work in that ban, then they're in your business. If you stay out of that ban, they have no say. And so it's just something to point out because for those of you that are involved in projects, the regulatory process can introduce additional time and additional challenges and the need for additional mitigations. And so it's important to highlight that as we put out our images to spark conversations, that we could do it a variety of different ways if we do anything.
Yeah, and believe me, I understood the consequences of being within their jurisdiction. Just wanted to know what the boundary was.
100 feet from the high tide line.
Okay. Then the the overflow lot location, if we decided down the road, God help me, I don't want to, but to do 2 lots and to sequence them, could that location, if we built first, accommodate have the same capacity as the existing main lot?
Not the existing main lot, but a portion of the main lot. Okay. So, I mean, clearly, from a construction staging perspective, there's lots of things to do. We're fortunate that we own that overflow lot fee title. It is your property, it's the public's property, and so it does give us options with respect to how we might stage parking if the future holds that our customers still choose to drive to our ferries.
And of course, the foundation challenges on the hillside might be less than the foundation challenges.
Correct. The existing lot, when it was built, was a old duck hunting club. The swamp that was filled in. Former Director Dietstro was the director of the Marin Municipal Water District during the drought. We found our predecessors a hose bib there that then allowed us to get a meter to build the Larkspur Ferry Terminal at that time in the midst of the historic drought in the North Bay.
Thank you. All right. Next, I think, is Director Thayer.
Okay, so first I want to thank the project team for that fantastic presentation, Jacobs, Apex, GHS Consulting Group, DLR, and Civic Edge. Thank you very much. That's fantastic. A couple of things I wanted to talk about with the first thing I'll address to Dennis because it's kind of a big idea, and I was wondering if there was any thought of undergrounding the parking garage. I know that is a big increased cost. However, you know, against the waterfront, it would be really nice to have something. Mike is making faces at me, our president. It would be nice to have something, you know, that is less visible. And so my comments also are, you know, to the design team to try to design it so that it is at most least visible from the roadways and from our neighboring area.
I'll put on my engineer hat and answer that. If you give me enough money, I can do anything.
I know.
It's incredibly impractical in terms of not just the initial cost, but the operating costs of such a facility. The reality is, if you're coming across the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge and you exit on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, you're driving westbound, that lot would disappear into the Wood Island Hill. Because there's a hill there right now that you're driving west that obstructs your view. So there's a lot of locations where even if you put a 2- or 3-story structure on that site, it would not affect the view for very many people. And so he showed you renderings where it's most visible, but an underground parking structure is not feasible on the existing parking lot site. Against the hill, it would be very expensive, but at least it wouldn't pop out of the ground with the high tide.
I understand that, Dennis. So then, and I did want to add that I did not want to go back through the drawings, but I did have questions on those because I couldn't tell what was where on some of them. But
private briefing for any director that's interested. We've had staff walk you through the various views and drawings.
Sure. And then the only other thing that jumped out at me was if you go to page 75 and 76, that the passive boating that would really impact the rowers. I was just going to ask that you do some outreach to Marin Rowing Association, if you haven't already, because they know best, you know, what the impacts would be to their boats. And from looking at what you've written, it seems to me that this impact already exists. However, with increased ferry trips, perhaps you're seeing an impact. So I wanted to ask that question.
With them, Mike Hoffman's staff coordinates with them. They're out there every morning rowing as the sun comes up, and so we have a long history of working collaboratively with them, and we can continue that. The decision to switch to all catamarans will minimize the current impact that exists today. So it's important to note that. I believe Ron stated that as well as David in the presentation. So the switch to the catamarans will reduce the existing wave profiles that exist out there today. Even today, we have found a way to coexist with them. If we had more trips during, you know, the commute hours or midday, those are not hours that the rowers are out there. They're generally out there first thing in the morning, crack of dawn. And it's impressive to see how we coexist with them.
Yes, my son's a former rower, so they also come out at night, you know, after school. But, again, maybe Dennis, you'll find some kind of good grant funding to, but I, again, wanted to thank the team. This is very impressive, especially this early on. Thank you.
Director Moulton Peters?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I had a couple of questions. One for the main lot, just wondering if sea level rise was being addressed in your planning or if there was sea level rise effects. And then the second one on the overflow parking, Dennis, I thought your comment about possible use by SMART made a lot of sense. And that connection has always been hampered in some people's mind by the length of pedestrian distance to the ferry. And so I wondered if we might consider taking a look at what it would take to run an autonomous vehicle shuttle in conjunction with an overflow parking lot. People have talked about this. We're looking into things, so could we consider adding that?
My recollection is SMART's enabling legislation as passed by the voters contemplated shuttles at all the SMART stops. So certainly autonomous shuttles would be one way to achieve that, perhaps in a more economical fashion than having staff. But, you know, we're not in the local bus business. We can do it under contract for others. The geometry of getting up there and turning a bus around does not accommodate a full-size bus, so a smaller vehicle, autonomous or, you know, driven by a human is more appropriate for that setting. You know, if I'm in a glib mood, I offer up that we can always dredge across or Francis Strait to bring me closer to the train if that's what the community wants.
Well, then you could underground the parking lot too.
Yes, I was just gonna say, you can underground my parking garage, Dennis. I know you can find the money.
But, yeah, so, you know, people talk about the length of the walk because it's new. I'll offer a couple of analogies. If you walk from the Embarcadero BART station to the Salesforce Transit Center, if you take BART and then take the bus to this location, which some of our staff does, that walk is, for Google Maps, 1 minute shorter than the walk at Larkspur. So it's a similar distance, similar time. You know, so it's not dissimilar. And then if you go to East Bay BART parking lots, like in Lafayette or in Orinda, and you park in the lots, the distance you walk from your car to the gates to go into that station are longer than the distance between the SMART platform and where you board the ferry boat at Larkspur. So it's new for a new customer group. And I'm not saying that if you're mobility impaired or if you're a little up in years like I'm getting to be, that it might, you know, be more challenging for you. But it's not dissimilar to what exists in many other locations.
Next, Dr. Snyder's been waiting a long time.
No, well, I don't know if no, thank you for this presentation. This is really exciting. As I've had worked on the water for a long time, and being I mean, this whole transportation mix is really kind of a neat. I'm really full support, and I'm looking forward to more on this. But I was wondering, with I know we're moving from the cats to from the Spaldings to the cats. How long is that going to take? And with the smaller wakes, are we able to move faster through those no wake zones because they're the cats and the trip's going to be quicker?
So how quickly we do that conversion is tied up with money and CARB deadline, California Resources Board. But the board took that action, so we are looking forward to doing that. With respect to the difference, the Spaldings have a slightly longer length they have to travel when they leave the Larkspur Channel, or the no wake, slower speed, and that's a function of their larger wake, but it's not an appreciable time difference. The high-speed cats that we operate is a 30-minute trip, basically from Larkspur to San Francisco. It's the fastest way to go, and that's why it's so popular. And it's not really an appreciable difference there, but it is appreciable going across the bay. So the Spaldings are about 15 minutes slower if you go all the way across, but the speed profile is just for a little bit longer, out a couple hundred yards up the channel.
And capacity, are they going to be bigger on the?
So the plan the board adopted, we envision ultimately having 500 passenger high-speed cats, which will be standardized in our fleet someday. That will work at any location. They're very maneuverable. The Spaldings are not very maneuverable, so tying them up in San Francisco or in a windy day in Tiburon or Sausalito can be quite challenging. it does affect the reliability of our service. So they'll provide faster trips, they're much more maneuverable vessels, and they provide a much smaller weight profile.
And I would just say, I really appreciate your analysis early on, because I do remember my father-in-law back in 17 still not being able to get on the ferries and being turned away, and also be involved with SMART over the years with all the SMART folks advocating for the expansion of that and the funding and the continual funding of that. That's just going to keep adding capacity. And then, of course, the hot topic of housing, as we, kind of continue and all is going to add to that too. So I really like this plan and look forward to working on kind of seeing it come to fruition, and however we can be helpful, there for you. But thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks to my fellow directors for asking some great questions. I'm just curious, it's kind of a SMART question. Is SMART, because option number 2 obviously was working with SMART, are they doing an independent concurrent study exactly like we're doing here? Or are we working together in any way? Or
We're working together, but they're not doing a study of parking at this location. But we own a piece of real estate. When we talk to the public, we want to show them that this is one possibility where parking could be. And, obviously it would be useful to SMART and us if it was built at that location.
And then a follow-up on that, I'm sorry. Director Peters talked about the autonomous vehicle, and I'm just wondering, as we go through this transition, whatever location is decided, are we doing any study with regards to last mile delivery to help customers in that San Rafael, Larkspur area to get to the terminal with some kind of last mile delivery? And I know we don't do that, but are we thinking about getting into that business at all, or?
Our principal funding source is tied to tolls, and so we have to spend it on getting cars off the grid. Otherwise, we'll be subject to litigation and constitutional challenge. So if others provide funding, we have the flexibility to do other things. One of the things that really helped access to the ferry terminal is the Cal Park bike tunnel. When that opened, the distance, because some of our staff walked it actually from San Rafael to San Rafael, is greatly reduced. And the ease of people getting from downtown San Rafael to the Larkspur ferry is greatly diminished with that. So that was arguably a godsend, that opening of that Cal Park tunnel for our Larkspur ferry service for those that commute in that fashion, especially from downtown San Rafael. And Mike knows it well, as does Director Hill. It's really quick.
Thanks for asking the question.
Question on just how do we verify that people parking there, are they riding the ferry? I mean, are we
So we
looking
have a
at?
paid parking program we instituted several years ago. Before the pandemic, we would net $600,000 a year in parking revenue. We did that so that, and then we had free shuttles. So that if you parked, it cost you a little more than if you took the free shuttles. And so that was a policy thing that the board thought that made sense. So that if you ride a bike or took a free shuttle, it was cheaper than if you actually chose to drive to the facility. And it's a $2 a day charge.
Thank you. Are there any other directors?
I realize that construction projects, the estimates are often wrong, but what was the estimated construction time for the option 1?
We're not there yet, Dick. A lot of it is similar to the San Rafael Transit Center project that we just talked about. We have to go through the environmental analysis. We have to come up with something that we want to go forward with, and then we have to find money to build it.
And then how many, and maybe this is too, not there yet, the difference in parking spaces in the lot that's a ways away and the garage on option 1?
It actually depends on how you mix and match things. It depends on the number of levels that you would have in each of those facilities. And as Dennis said, you wouldn't be able to replicate the current surface lot in the overflow lot configuration for a garage. You'd have to be more stories up in the air than people would like. So we're looking in those different concepts. There's also the possibility to mix and match. So the overflow lot plus part of the main lot. Again, these are just all things to be considered as far as what might be.
Start conversations with the public.
Thank you.
Are there any other directors? Director Rabbit.
Yeah, thank you very much. And really happy to see the study, and especially retiring the Spalding, because things will be actually moving in a better direction. And Obviously, the CEQA document for the expanding the 42 trips made sense probably years ago, and even more so today going forward. So happy about that. Just on the parking, if you're looking for opinions, in the perfect world, making customers happy, you would have more parking closer to the destination. And I know the logistics of construction, but again, construction lasts for 1 or 2 years, and it would be hell. But I would also we should make sure that we're looking at the following 50 years primarily. And again, as a smart director, in the perfect world, we would actually do both projects.
We were waiting for that.
Yeah, and because I know that, and everything you said regarding the distance from the between the two, it's just really interesting because it is such a hot topic. Whereas when you get off the ferry and your ultimate distance in the city, I guess that's up to you to where you're going, as opposed to being forced to go from one district to the other. But anyway, really appreciate the collaboration on that. And, but I think ultimately, no one parks in overflow parking as first choice. Right. And it's overflow. So, I would just keep that in mind as we go forward.
Call it free-meter parking.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the great presentation. Really good information here. Lots to chew on. Since these are early conversations, I was wondering if, well, actually two things. Director Molson Peters brought up the idea or the concern about sea level rise. I'm not sure that it's been adequately addressed. City of San Francisco is very concerned about sea level rise. We're getting ready to spend about $13 billion to protect about 7.5 miles of our shoreline. So I'd like an answer on that, and I have a follow-up question.
I apologize.
Thank you.
I apologize. I missed that. But yeah, we're required under state environmental law to address sea level rise as part of this project. So whatever we do with respect to any construction out there of any parking structure, we'll have to take into account anticipated sea level rise based on the best science available.
So we have no data, no information at this point.
And there's been lots of studies done, but if once we launch the environmental process with the public, that's one of the things we'll have to look at. But the bay is expected to rise, and so that will affect all of our facilities adjacent to the bay, other than the bridge. But it will affect all of our other facilities. So, San Rafael, our bus yard is adjacent to the bay. San Rafael Transit Center is near the bay. And obviously the Larksville Ferry Terminal, our San Francisco Ferry Terminal, Tiburon, and Sausalito. So it's a global problem. It's a broader Bay Area. It's not a single community problem. Sausalito's not going to solve sea level rise, but it impacts all of our facilities. It's something we're very cognizant of. Luckily, the boats float. But beyond that,
Really bad swimmer though.
but we have major challenges in our future.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that comprehensive answer. And I had a second question. Since we're in the early discussions and I realize that we're in a time of transition coming out of COVID, and we're talking about a project that we hope will meet the needs of all stakeholders in 20, 30 years from now. And in light of the fact that the housing element is a challenge for all counties, I'm wondering whether we have made any considerations or will consider or are legislatively able to consider housing on some of these properties. I realize that I'm a resident of San Francisco, and we're built housing everywhere. So maybe I'm coming from that that viewpoint, and we're talking about Marin County for our facility, but just as a general concern about meeting the housing needs of the state of California and all counties, I'm wondering if there's going to be a discussion at some point about considering housing for this site.
That's once again an issue that affects us in multiple locations. San Rafael Transit Center, when we build a new center, the existing site will be available. And so we want it zoned as high as possible before we sell it, so that we can maximize the return. But we also have property in Larkspur, but we also have property in Santa Rosa. And so there are programs with the Federal Transit Administration that allows transit agencies to do transit-oriented development. But we would always defer to the local community we're in, to their wishes with respect to how we proceed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Director Rudoni, I believe you've been patiently waiting.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for the presentation, and I appreciate the planning effort. Two questions, one for the engineers. It just appears your timeline's really compressed here to get to where you need to be, and I just wondered if you could make a remark about that.
Well, that's conceptual thanks, Ron. That high-level schedule, it is a little bit conceptual, and PowerPoint can be a little bit challenging. We do have a bit of work coming up here in the coming months, especially with the community outreach that we anticipate. So, yeah, I'm happy to follow up on some specific questions. Apologies for the limitations of some of our graphics there.
Being involved with the transit center and the 101, 580 interchange, and looking at this timeline, I'm just going, wow. This is
I wouldn't consider it to be final in any way, shape, or form. We've had to reconfigure it several times through the course of, again, having delays because of the pandemic and getting some of this out of the gate.
Yeah, it is a go right schedule, as probably about everybody knows, almost never actually materializes. So.
Thank you. And then maybe for Dennis Mulligan, how does our strategic plan inform this process or not?
Part of the strategic planning is looking at travel in the 101 corridor. So we're doing a survey of customers and non-customers, bridge, bus, and ferry, just to learn more about those that use our facilities and those that don't. So that's an outcome that we'll have results next year that we'll be presenting to the board. And I think we'll learn a lot from that going forward. And it's something that's expensive to do, but it's probably something we should do every few years based on the fact that the pandemic was such a alert or an upset to the status quo of how things were going. But so I think that'll help us tremendously. And then separately, we're looking with our North Bay partners to do travel within Marin and Sonoma, a study. And that's with SMART, Marin Transit, Petaluma Transit, Santa Rosa City Bus, and Sonoma County Transit. It's not looking into the city, but I think it'll dovetail nicely with that. And MTC has offered some staff support with that planning effort.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Are there any other directors? Well, go ahead.
When you're done with any director questions, I just had one thing I wanted to mention.
Okay, I'll bring in that time. Any other directors have a comment? I just want to make a quick comment. Something magical happened this last week. COP28 managed to get all of the nations that do fossil fuels to have a target for removing. An exceptional improvement. But that's very important. But just exchanging a gas-fired vehicle with an electric vehicle will not solve climate change. There are going to have to be radical changes that have to be made in transportation and everything else. And I hope that we're watching that very carefully, because our world will probably be very different within the next 20 years in ways that we can't even imagine today. And I hope it was a very good presentation, but I think we really need to look at climate change and the effects of it, of what will happen from here on. Okay, with that, yes.
I think Ron wants to make one more comment.
Oh, okay.
One more comment.
Sorry.
Now that the rest of the consultant team is here at the table with me, I wanted to acknowledge Elizabeth Sunshine, who did a lot of the initial stakeholder outreach and getting opinions and what people would like to see in the future. Robert Jansen, who is a dreamer and showed you different renderings of what a possible parking facility might look like someday. Of course, David Dick, the project manager, and Shisin, who has been responsible for our travel demand modeling, and we've gone back and forth however many times over trying to get something out of the gate as we've kind of regrouped from what was available from a 2018 perspective. So it's been really good work, been a lot of conversations with his peers at other agencies like TAM and MTC to try to get a really good perspective on what we think the future might be. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate it. No action is required on this informational report. Before we move on to the next item, Madam Secretary, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak? And she has handed me a card. for Matthew Hartzell, and he has a handout. Mr. Hartzell, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. And Emma, can you please give me a warning 30 seconds before my time is up?
I'm going to start that timer in front of you. And
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Matthew Hartzell. I'm a resident of Larkspur, a frequent user of the Larkspur Ferry, and I speak to you today as Director of Planning of WTB TAM. We're a community-based organization with a 30-year track record of advocating for sustainable and multimodal transportation locally, regionally, and nationally. I think it would be very valuable for this group and the board to hear more details about what these stakeholders who have been engaged so far have had to say about the proposed parking garages. I'm guessing that several of the stakeholders would have been quite opposed to the notion that a parking garage needs to be built. And I expect that as you move into the public outreach phase next year, you are also going to hear from numerous community groups, transportation, environmental, and otherwise, opposed to a parking garage at this site. We acknowledge and realize that you have a forecast that shows future increase in ferry ridership, and that's to be congratulated and celebrated. We'd love to see ferry ridership go back to pre-COVID levels and even double on top of that, which it looks like your forecast is calling for. But I don't believe that a forecast for increased ferry ridership is the same thing as a forecast for increased demand for parking. There are other ways, there are alternative modal uses that can bring people to the ferry and solve the ferry's first and last mile problem and landside access problem. A majority of the Larkspur Ferry riders today come from a fairly small area just within a few miles away of the ferry terminal, which is a perfect distance for bicycle use instead of car use. This is a population of people who have already decided to use public transportation, to set aside their car for the trip to San Francisco. So it's not that much of a push to ask those people to find other modes of transportation to get to the ferry. If you build this parking garage, you're going to create induced demand, which will increase car trips. The ferry terminal is already one of the biggest causes of traffic in Marin County, and this parking garage will only make that situation worse. In fact, I seriously doubt that it would pass the CEQA review process because the vehicle miles traveled that will be increased from this parking garage could very well make it unable to pass the CEQA review. So I would really urge this committee and this board to look at all of the other alternatives that are available for getting people to the ferry. Mr. Mulligan actually made a great point saying that the Cal Park Hill Tunnel has made it much easier for people from San Rafael and points north to get to the ferry, and SMART has as well. And I think there's room for improvement on the connection between the SMART station and the ferry terminal, and incentives to get people to come from Sonoma and all over Marin County to get to the ferry by SMART. But the problem is people south of Corte Madera Creek, people from Larkspur proper and Corte Madera and Mill Valley. The current bike network has some major gaps in it. And if you turn, 30 seconds? Are we out of 3 minutes or 30 seconds? Okay, targeting the multimodal network will allow people to get to the ferry and fulfill your values and goals without this eyesore and traffic generator parking garage. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other, do we have any other in the room?
I have no other speaker cards, but I believe, Justine, you have a speaker on the line, so Justine, I'm gonna let you take this over.
Okay.
That's correct. Thank you. Our speaker that we have today is Susan Nawberry. Susan, go ahead, please.
Good morning, and thank you for taking my comment. So I understand that this parking garage is estimated to cost about $75 to $100 million. And then previously, we were just discussing that there could be funding gaps for the San Rafael Transit Center. So I urge the board not to fund or consider funding this parking garage, although I understand it's in the early phases of exploration. That money really could be used to improve other things like finishing the transit center and improving the connection from SMART train to the ferry. For example, when people take the train to Larkspur, they're actually expecting to be put right by the ferry terminal. That $75 to $100 million could be used to potentially create a connection possibly even a mini train bridge over SFD to connect to the ferry building or ferry lot. In 2019, I emailed and asked that the 24 service be increased because they were standing room only, and I was told that we would adjust the times, but I didn't understand how a 15-minute time adjustment reduced demand for a bus. So if the Bridge District increased bus service down SFD, then perhaps there would be less demand for driving. And also, it's $17.50 for a round trip ferry. However, it's only $8.75 to drive across the bridge. And you just said that the bridge has a monopoly on transit across Marin. So the bridge is specifically inducing demand for cars and driving across the Golden Gate Bridge by making it half the cost of the ferry. So by building a parking garage, you're also inducing demand for cars. Why should it cost $17.50 to take a round trip ferry trip when it's only $8.75 to drive across the bridge? People make choices, but the Golden Gate Bridge District is a monopoly with a small subset of choices. And I think that the traffic correlation is severely flawed because people have been driving a lot during the pandemic. And you need to look at 2019 traffic studies and also compare the bus service. And bring back the 25 line, bring back the 24 line. People will use it, but right now the ferry times are pretty inconvenient. I really don't understand how you can talk about increasing parking when ferries aren't even at capacity. But when we ask for more convenient times for the ferry, you get a response that contradicts this current study, which is there's not enough demand to increase the ferry times and schedules. So it does seem like the Bridge District is potentially talking out of both sides of its mouth right now by saying we're going to anticipate future demand. However, not when it comes to actually increasing the ferry currently, but maybe to build this giant parking garage, which would be a huge expenditure in fossil fuels. And instead of using that space for a parking garage, I think the Bridge District should consider building affordable housing the way BART has done with its BART stations. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other?
I would like to poll the room if you don't mind, just for a moment.
Sure.
Is there anyone else that's joined us? Thank you. Is there anyone else that's joined us that would like to speak this morning? Please use ** to unmute yourself and let me know.
Elise Simonian.
I'm sorry, can you give me your name?
Elise Simonian.
Thank you, Elise. Is there anybody else that's joined us that would like to speak this morning? Please use ** to unmute yourself and let me know. Okay, no one else. Elise, go ahead, please.
Hello, I'm Elise Simonian. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Larkspur. I've been here since April of 2022, so this is my first introduction to this project. The City of Larkspur is seeking sites where housing can be developed and is currently preparing the city's housing plan for the next 8 years to 2031. And I'm always thinking of the following 8-year plan too. The draft plan includes hundreds of new housing units in this area on Larkspur Landing Circle, including the Ross Valley Sanitary District site. In addition, 350 units of workforce housing is being constructed on the state site just east of the city limits. The city's adopted new residential design standards, and this area is now a transit village zone that allows structures up to 7 stories tall. This is a great place for housing since it's in a high resource area and due to the proximity to the ferry and the train. Residents of this area have the lowest vehicle miles traveled in the city and even throughout the county. I wanted to call in at this early stage to suggest that the overflow lot is a particularly great place for new housing, and I could also envision housing development on the main lot, which could work with the parking structure. There are new state grants available, as well as financing available through the Bay Area Housing Authority to help developers partner with public agencies to produce housing. So please get in touch with me if you're interested in discussing housing at the site. Thank you.
Hi, I also have a comment.
Sure.
Give me one moment, please. I do believe we have Warren Wells who's joined us. Warren, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Sorry about that. I wasn't able to unmute earlier.
That's okay. No problem. Warren, go ahead, please.
Hi, Director of Staff. This is Warren Wells, Policy and Plan Director for the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. I understand the need to accommodate future ferry riders and keeping the cars off the 101 between Larkspur and the bridge is very important. I do just want to, question the need to spend tens of millions of dollars on yet another parking garage. Larkspur Ferry Terminal sees very little bus service today, and the bikeway connections to the terminal are substantially incomplete from all directions. I strongly encourage the district to explore ways to bring in more riders who are not traveling by car and leaving it all day. I haven't seen actually the cost estimates for this project yet, but structured parking typically costs upwards of $60,000 or $70,000 per space, often more than the cars that are being stored there. A holistic process will do more than simply kind of follow the old tried playbook of building a parking garage, but explore ways to improve those bikeway connections and secure bike parking. We know e-bike sales continue to go through the roof, vastly expanding the potential commute shed as long as the connections between people's homes and the transit center are safe for people of all experience levels, and the bike parking is secure so people can trust the bike will be there when they come home at the end of the workday. And so I strongly urge that whatever modeling the consulting team does on parking demand should incorporate the increasing uptake of e-bikes in the coming years and beyond. And while a parking garage may be necessary, a commitment to green transportation will look like prioritizing people who ride the bus or bicycle. I realize we can't dictate how people arrive, but doing the right thing, which is often the cheapest thing for the district, should be strongly encouraged. And I think Director Hill had some great comments here on this. I realize that many of the issues occur off of district property, but the district should work with its partners in Larkspur, Corte Madera, and Marin County. Several of the supervisors are on this board to create a seamless trip for the many ferry riders that do live within a couple miles of the terminal. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you much, Mr. Wells. With that, I think, do you have any more speakers?
I did not hear that we have any more speakers. No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will now move on to agenda item number 6, which is a monthly report on bridge traffic, transit ridership trends, and transit service performance. The staff report begins on page 105, and Dennis will present this report. Go ahead, Dennis.
I'll just be brief. The written report is before you, and I'm available to answer any questions.
No questions? Okay. Dennis, thank you. Are there any questions or comments for Director on that? We don't have that. That concludes the discussion on this item. Madam Secretary, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on number 6?
We have no other further speakers in the room or on the line.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you. No action is required on this informational report. We will move on to item 7, a monthly report on activities related to Marin Transit. Dennis, do you have anything on this item?
All is well.
Very well. Let's see. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from directors on item number 6?
Excuse me.
Okay. That concludes discussion of this item, and there's no action required for item 7. Madam Secretary, is there anyone in the public wishing to speak on item 7 or address the committee or on item 8? Is there public comment?
We have no other speakers.
Okay, thank you. We have reached the end of the agenda. Many thanks to today's presenters for that. This is real. Many thanks to today's presenters for the update of these important projects. May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? May I have a second? Who seconded? Was that you?
Yes, that was me.
Thank you. We got that. Hearing no objections, this concludes the meeting of the Transportation Committee. Thank you, colleagues, and your patience and my effort here. The time is 10:56.